India's usage of credit cards, the payment transactions such as UPI, debit cards, etc. Now, new report by Kotak Institutional reveals that credit cards are used in as many as 75% of all transactions that are made online. Well, one would have guessed UPI taking over credit cards and debit cards. That hasn't really happened. Very interesting insights that the Kotak Institutional Equities report reveals here, also suggesting that credit cards are used most in south of India, which is about 75 to 80% credit cards are used in west and south of India. Let's discuss this. Let's bring up Barnik again. Barnik, interesting data points. One would assume that UPI would have overthrown credit cards. UPI would be the king, but that hasn't really happened, has it? Where UPI seem to have replaced the use of debit cards to some extent. People are still using credit cards, and more so in west and south of India.
Yeah, so let's decipher the data. The data is not that surprising, right? It is not surprising that a lot of the credit card transactions are in south and west of India, because a lot of the credit card actually activations are in the south and west of India. When you're a bank issuing a credit card, you're looking for salaried employees, you have steady sources of income, you're also looking for steady businesses. And if you look at the demographics we have in the south and west, it's very amenable for banks to underwrite that risk. So I'm not very surprised that 75% of this is happening in south and west, because that's where actually the new upwardly mobile wealth is situated given the employment profile we have. Now, let's look at why are we seeing so many credit card transactions and not debit card transactions. See, there are two reasons for that, right? One simple reason is very simple, is that banks actually incentivize you to do more credit card transactions at all points. Even when you go to buy something from Amazon or a retail store, you will see that there are options for you to break it into EMI installments, do a buy now, pay later model, because banks actually earn a lot of money from credit card transactions, right? Often there's obviously the humongous interest, but there are often some processing fees. So the incentives in the system are completely geared towards every ecosystem player, including banks, the retail players, to encourage you to do credit cards, because they're giving you cashbacks, they're giving you freebies, they're giving you incentives, right? That's because fundamentally banks earn far more from credit cards, and debit cards are actually a cost center and not a revenue center. So I'm not very surprised that a lot of the transactions are happening in credit cards, because that's how the banks and the full ecosystem wants you to do, because they earn far more money from you when you spend it on the credit card. In fact, on a debit card, they are losing money, right? Because they can't charge you anything on a debit card transaction. Secondly, if you look at UPI, the UPI activation feature for credit cards has not been publicized very aggressively by anyone, right? In fact, all of the UPI transactions, maybe 90-95% of the UPI transactions are happening either through a direct bank linkage or through a debit card linkage, right? And I don't think there is enough awareness. Maybe it's deliberate by the banks, because they're probably losing or not making as much money if it's via UPI, and customer awareness. So if there's more customer awareness that you can actually link a credit card to your UPI, you will see more transactions. But I suspect that the banks are not encouraging it, because they probably are not going to make as much money as if they were making if you're using a credit card directly, either online or even at the retail store, where there's a lot of incentives they're giving to you to use it.
Right, and I think what's also more interesting is to what extent and what ticket size people are consuming. I mean, come to think of it, around 20% of the credit cards are used in lowest ticket size, which is less than 25,000 rupees, and 60% of the credit cards with comparatively higher limits, about 25,000 rupees to 2 lakh rupees. I want to understand from you, on the back of RBI tightening norms around unsecured personal loans, it is understood or believed that all sorts of fintech companies are also going to tighten their rules and norms around who they lend to. Will credit card and getting a credit card now become more difficult for an average person? Would this ensure, or would there be a hit perhaps on the credit card usage and the number of credit cards that are enrolled in and the number of people they're given out to?
Yeah, so I think you will see a definite slowdown in new credit card enrollments, particularly for first-time credit card users, right? One of the things you should note is that if you have a debit card or a credit card product, you actually have a credit history on file, right? Which can actually be accessed quite easily online for yourself. Credit card is one of the most easiest products for the banks to actually understand the risk profile of the individual they're lending it to. It is actually far easier than a lot of other unsecured lending. So in that case, even today, credit cards are not haphazardly lent out to people. In fact, if you look at the way banks lend it out to you, they will typically lend it out to people who are salaried employees. You will see a lot of credit card kiosks in airports, but not in railway stations, because remember, they're looking after the guys who are able to take a flight, will be the kind of creditworthy person who can afford a credit card, right?
Right.
And even after that, there is often a lot of checks which happen, often with the access of credit history, which allows them to underwrite the risk. So banks, in my opinion, are far more capable of managing credit risk on credit cards versus NBFCs or startups or on unsecured lending. So while there's a crackdown, I expect there to be a slowdown, but I don't expect to be credit card spending to fundamentally increase or decrease, right?
Okay.
Given this, I think credit cards would remain, I think, reasonably favorable. It's an aspirational product for a lot of the middle class of India. I think people will want to have it. If you have the income profile, people will give you banks, will give you credit cards. If you have one credit card, then other people will want to give you credit cards, right? So I think this thing will continue. I think credit cards are one segment where, as India becomes more banked and more professional, you'll see more and more usage, as you've seen in other places.
Absolutely. I mean, and come to think of it, we were having a very short discussion in the newsroom as to what prevents people from using more credit cards, financial literacy being one. But I think the other biggest factor perhaps is also their risk-taking capability. I mean, Krishna, a lot of people are not sure whether they'll be able to pay back if they get a credit card and buy something that they cannot afford at this moment. Perhaps one's risk-taking ability also defines their chances of going for one or multiple credit cards.
Right, and also their own earning capacity and the cash flows that they have. I mean, the question that comes to your mind when you see so much of spends happening on credit cards is that, is there a lack of cash? Is there a lack of steady jobs that give you cash? Does it mean that like you have to defer payments all the time because you're not sure of your own cash flow? And yet at the same time you have expenses to meet, you have a life to live. So the question I would go back to asking is that does the excessive use of credit card also point to a lack of availability of cash?
Absolutely. I mean, those are questions that remain unanswered at the moment. But Banig, I think the big message here is credit card usage is likely to only expand from here on as more and more people become aware of the benefits of using a credit card. Thank you very much, Banig. Always good to have you on the show. Always good to listen to you.